Welcome to the One Step Ahead series, part storytelling, part podcast, and entirely a celebration. This project is a way to honor the wise beings and medicines that serve us in creating a life that is aligned with the unique beings we are, and the values that connect us to ourselves, to others, to our precious planet, and energies in the universe. You're invited to share in the intimate conversations that arise when we ponder and explore the questions: what does living in alignment feel like? What does it look like? How do we find our way, and who are the guides that can help us discover and deepen our understanding of ourselves? If you're a curious seeker, if you've known that something about your circumstances is not quite the right fit and wondered, what else is there? This is a place to open, expand, and explore. One step ahead of our past, of where we've been, one step closer to where we want to be, where we're meant to be, finding alignment. Always, still, putting one foot in front of the other. Welcome back, friends. Welcome to my wonderful co-host, Sabrina Siwiec. Welcome to our incredible guest today, Wesley Jobe. And welcome to all of our friends watching and listening to the One Step Ahead series. The autumn season, full confession, friends, it's rolling out a little slower than I anticipated it would. And that is okay. We're going with the flow. It's definitely gotten a little bit cooler since we were last together, friend. And I know I'm wearing a turtleneck, so that says a lot. It's not even officially winter yet, but I'm feeling the chill. Yeah, really excited to be here with everyone. Really excited. It feels really good. Friends might notice we've got a little bit of a different mix today than usual. And I want to both acknowledge and just have a little chat about Wesley before we dive into our conversation. Appreciating that I'm the one that puts these episodes together, and I have noticed that in a lot of cases the conversation feels a little one-sided, which makes sense. I know my side, Sabrina knows her side. We have conversations with various guests, and we have always had female identifying practitioners as our guests on the One Step Ahead series, because they really represent so much of the team, my care team, and everyone who has really helped hold and tend to me over the last couple of years. And I met Wesley before my life blew up.
Oh.
I did. And Wesley himself, you can find more of him at resonancebreathwork.com. He's a breathwork facilitator, a retreat guide and host. He is a Qigong. How do you say that, Wesley? Please help.
Qigong.
Thank you. Practitioner and guide. And he also plays the didgeridoo. So if you ever have the opportunity to be in a sound bath where there's a didgeridoo, there's something just extra about that. And I actually met Wesley the first time when I attended a psilocybin medicine ceremony, my first and only. He coordinated that space so beautifully with his whole little team. And I know that I'm going to forget the name of your co-pilot. If you would please help fill that in, along with Ocean and Kyla, who folks who have been following along have already met. And Wesley, please remind me who helped prepare all those scrumptious meals with you.
Oh yeah, Alyssa.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. It was such an incredible weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day after retreat, we got to practice together again at a separate suite event, and some really potent magic happened there. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about that. But before I keep talking even more, welcome. Thank you for being here, you two.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to welcome Wesley. It's definitely a different flair from all the really deeply rooted feminine energy we've had on the podcast. I too have being able to partake in Wesley's medicine. And so I can speak to the potency of it. And I'm excited for you to share and walk us through some more about alignment and what that means for you. So yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I often start with a really big, broad question. And so I will put that out to you, and please feel free to respond in whatever nugget or pathway makes sense. Sabrina just mentioned, and we've talked about this a little bit, that the theme of the show is really on cultivating a life that feels genuinely aligned with who we are as authentic expressions of ourselves. Acknowledging that it's a lifelong journey and practice, and we kind of ebb in and out of alignment as things may go. You are one of the very few male identifying beings that I've encountered in the space of somatics and healing. And the word is circle tending, and I don't even know what that means, but circle tending seems very appropriate. And I'm curious to know, Wesley, how is it that you found your way to doing the work that you're doing, to cultivating the lifestyle? Because I know you're very active in the outdoors. Like you have a variety of really rich passions. How did you find those, and how did you find yourself to where you are, helping others now really cultivate and nurture that for themselves?
Geez, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Answering questions like this requires a lot of editing. No matter how many times I practice or journal to the effect of answering these kinds of things for myself. Yeah. So I want to take a moment to just let
Please do.
let what matters most kind of percolate here and just be really informative.
While that's landing for you, I will also offer that one of the beautiful things about our series is it's an art project more than it is a podcast. And so when we take time to be thoughtful in our responses, it's amazing how much richness that offers people who are here for our conversation. So thank you, and please take the time that you wish.
That's great. That sings for me too, and I'm glad you mentioned even just that. I'm very artistically oriented and always have been as well. I tell some people when I introduce myself that creativity is something that I feel proud to identify with as a trait of mine. And it's also something that I consciously hone and have for many, many years. Like a creative approach to thinking and observing the world and the interactions between acting and witnessing and acting and observing, that kind of thing, are like fundamental to everything that I do. So I have a strong belief that everybody is creative and artistic, and that art can be anything. And it really comes from the way that we approach it. So that one's nice for me to hear in the spaciousness you're offering. Yeah, how I came to this. Well, it's not the most original story. I'm a human like many of us, and a lot of how I came to do this work and to provide what I provide and to feel that it's worthwhile endeavor for me to keep doing is selfish in the first part, and it comes from pain. I mean, I hurt a lot when I was young in many ways, and I was confused a lot, and just the particular types of thorns and areas that they kind of struck me when I was young were super informative for my natural tendency as a living creature to want to not run into those problems again or not feel that pain anymore. And sure, some of it had, this initial tone of before having a lot more education maybe or frame of reference or comparison experiences. Yeah, it kind of came from like, oh, maybe escapism, let's call it. And some of that is really natural as well. And yeah, I guess through a lot of time, the part about me having a lot of passions and them being naturally rooted is a big part of it. So when I was very young, the first thing I remember, like some of the first things I remember were being outside, being encouraged to go outside with my family, and just absolutely falling in love with what I was seeing, what I was smelling, what I could feel. I mean, even the feeling of a sidewalk, like, just fascinated me in such a sensory way. It was completely tethered to the natural world and recognizing the separateness, like where I am not that. Like, oh, I feel like this, and this tree feels very different. And suddenly, again, just whoa, like how and why and how does it all work together kind of things. These just like exploded like fireworks in me, of fascination for wanting to learn more. And that curiosity is part of my creativity. I think they go hand in hand. So that informs a lot. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I can kind of look back in hindsight and think, oh, actually, all of these times that I spent alone in nature were actually really what one might call now healing experiences for me, or they were places of coping for me. So spending time alone in nature was my favorite thing. And I was choosing it from a place of joy and just orienting towards that, towards what I loved, towards what was good. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I realized things like, oh, I actually have a hard time being around a lot of people. It doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel easy. It doesn't always feel safe. Sometimes very much the opposite. And that's where a lot of these maybe thorns are coming from and things like that. So that, as I started to get more self-aware, became really like highlighted of relationships are hard. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do them great. I think I'm messing up a lot. That's hard. That's a heavy one sometimes. And how can I do better? Like I need to know. I just want to know how to do better because I love being alone in nature, yes, and I also really need people and love being around people. So how do I bridge these things? Was kind of the main question that led me down all of the different paths that I will edit out for now to move on with the conversation. And but yeah, it led me down a lot of interesting paths of like weaving back and forth between spending time in solitude, most of it outside, but even just recognizing that like my bedroom is also nature. Like everything around me is made of nature, even if it's really manufactured. Like a metal desk is not necessarily, you know, devoid of nature. I mean, it came from Earth also. So I got very introspective in times like that when I have that solitude. And then going out when I feel like safe or full or curious enough again to like reach out to people and interact with others. It's like, okay, cool. Like, let's see how that goes. And just this back and forth has been really interesting. So yeah.
Mm. A lot of what you speak to illustrates that you've gotten to know yourself very, very well,
Mm,
feeling into what is called for to tend to yourself, to feed your curiosity, and to keep going, keep exploring that. Very much on theme with the One Step Ahead series, right? We just got to keep putting one more step, then one more step.
mm.
And the more we can do so with curiosity and
Oh,
joy, it's a much more fulfilling experience. So thank you for sharing that.
mhm.
I really appreciate that at such a young age, you are so in tune, not just with your surroundings, but yourself, and knowing that the way that you felt at ease or peaceful and were able to detach from the overwhelm of people, of sensory experiences, was in nature. And I think that's so beautiful.
Mm.
Not enough kids that I observe have that connection these days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Hmm. It's just one of those interesting things, right? Like, I think it was just necessary for me. I just didn't know any other way. I just had to. I just followed that
yeah.
always.
Mm.
Yeah.
Up leveling it by with the self-awareness to be able to speak to the power and the magic of that in your life,
Mm.
and for it to be so much a part of you. It sounds like a little bit of a gift, really, in that I think so many other people go through experiences such as that in ways that they aren't able to actually connect with the energy that's out waiting for them in nature. And so they don't ever, or maybe not, that's a little too definitive, but it can be trickier to prioritize and get in touch with the healing energies that are outside, spending time sitting with, I was going to say, sitting with the trees or observing the creatures or all of these really sweet moments. It really struck something in me, Wesley, when you spoke about the not feeling good, not feeling well, the sadness, the confusion, and feeling into that peace when you were outside. As a little one, I lived in such a perfect spot to spend a lot of time outside, and I did. And I have a hunch that I also was healing and being rejuvenated, and so that I could, go back to everything on what was going on inside, but without even realizing it. And so thank you to my folks who had me living at the base of a mountain where I could climb trees and build forts with moss carpets. I really just love so much that that's a part of you as a young guy, and that it's a theme for you, because really, just even thinking back to the retreat that I attended with you, we were ensconced in nature, right? So to follow your intuition, to pull together experiences like that, really ensconced in nature, honoring and practicing with plant medicine, connecting in community, creating circle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. Can I add one more thing
Please.
here? As an example of like me as a kid and how this all kind of came to be as well. Part of the disconnect was actually all I wanted because of how people call it passion, like my innate passion for the natural world that I was observing and encouraged to observe. Lived in a very, very privileged way to have access to nature and live in a safe enough neighborhood. And my parents could let me do that. These kinds of things. Have enough self-awareness and like body autonomy to like walk and go and do it and that as well. And good friends that were willing to explore with me here and there. I got to this place where I was so thrilled, so thrilled and enamored with all of what I was seeing that I just wanted to share it. Very natural. And many kids do this. Hey, look at this. Hey, look at this. It was that. It was just this very typical kind of a child thing to be doing. And I was met sometimes, very memorable ways, with kind of like this pushback of like, oh, we don't have time. We don't care about that. Or like, I'm not going to lay on the ground. It's dirty. I don't want to look at that ant. It's gross. These kinds of things. And I felt like it was personal. Like I took it personally, and I didn't understand back then that I was actually trying to connect with people through my love of nature. And I was trying to be basically like Steve Irwin, if you know Steve Irwin. I saw his show when I was really young, and he was like, okay, idol. Like I put him up on this huge pedestal. Love this guy. Wish I could be him. People seem to be inspired by him doing what he does. And I wanted to be that, but I'm like trying to do it in the real world. So I'm like, okay, yeah, like look at this amazing thing. Like, look at these leaves. Isn't it really cool? And every time I had a person go, oh, I don't really care about that, I felt like torn apart from getting my social needs met as well. And I felt misunderstood as a person. Like my identity was so incorporated with my sheer joy and passion for nature that I felt entirely unseen at certain times. And that led to more aloneness. The sense of aloneness is very different than the sense of like freedom in the solitude. And those started contrasting. And I started getting like really interested of like, well, why did this feel so different? And why don't people care? And I started to think this is the solution. If only people cared more about the things that I cared about, they might feel as happy as I do. They might feel good as I do about life and recognize that it's not that hard. Like it's all around us. This abundance is here. This joy is here. And they're choosing to ignore it. And they're choosing not just to ignore that, but to also ignore me in the process. So it became this like messy, sticky web of uncertainty about what matters, how do I get people to care more? And that's been kind of my quest my entire life, is learning about relationships and people more so that I can keep that dream alive of being like a 5-year-old and being so excited to tell my parents about everything, but also recognizing that they have limits and needs. So not just like steamrolling them with all of my excitement all the time. That was really hard for me to understand that people didn't, yeah, that like people were maybe not ready to receive it all, kind of thing. And I had a really hard time taking it personally. So a lot of what I aim for now is really just to not think like, oh, I'm offering medicine. I mean, you both kind of spoke to that at the beginning of our conversations as well. But my aim is always just to invite people to get closer to the medicine of nature and of life that's always here. And it's not about me. I'm just trying to like reel them in and maybe take a break long enough to go, okay, like now we can look at this tree. Like now we can look at this beauty that's all around us. And maybe now it feels safe and now it feels open for us to do it together. And that is just been so beautiful to find things like breath work and even psilocybin and these and circles, like ways of like sharing and communicating where we take turns more, this kind of stuff to get that to happen pretty much. That was a lot more than I intended to say, but here we are. Too late.
Oh, I got all the feels as you explain that. I'm so excited. I think when I think about you as a child, and I have an 8-year-old, I'm not sure if you remember that from our retreat space together, but he's 8 now. And Sheena and I talk about this all the time, that, children and their ability to be present in the moment, particularly in nature, can be really confronting to adults who are lost in the hustle and bustle of life, and
Mm.
all of the behaviors and patterns that we adopt over the years of just really not being able to sit with the beauty and the curiosity and the gratitude that shows up when you can be in nature and truly be in nature and take that time. And so I can picture you as this young child and really just validate this whole idea that most children, all children, really just want to be seen. And you had this such a beautiful spark of authenticity when it came to your passion for nature. And it gets lost as we confront the adults in our life who just don't have the capacity for taking space in that moment. And it's really hard. It's hard for them to navigate. They all internalize it. We all internalize it, as it must be something wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah. How could we not? How could we not? I didn't know anything else, right? My frame of reference is only this, like internal.
It's just
Focus.
right. It's what's right in front of you. You don't have to worry about bills or work or
Yeah.
all the other things that are going through parents' minds.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And seeing that it was an interesting thing with the level of awareness that I had, or whatever it is, it feels very normal to me, obviously, 'cause it's always been that. But I was painful. I will say this specifically, painfully aware that I was taking it personally. It was
Mm.
hurting a part of me to not be seen. And also it was almost like this higher, let's call it ego. That's maybe an easy term for people to use for reference in this way. Like part of my ego also felt like tragically heartbroken that the adults weren't letting themselves see what I was seeing. And I also felt in a way like a rift was growing between us immediately because I was now like wanting to be really cautious of like, I don't want to become like that.
Ooh.
How can I not let myself be that? And I also need these people and want to be around them. So, oh my gosh, new problem. Whole life quest unfolds there as well. Start my library of understanding humans, please, because this is kind of weird. But yeah, that was definitely in there.
So he arrived on the planet fairly insightful, I would say. To encounter that in your youth and to have to know, they're missing out. But they're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. I keep, yeah, I just really want to celebrate that because it's such a beautiful example of not getting steamrolled by, well, I mean, that's not fair to say because definitely your heart and the parts of you that were growing and cultivating a sense of self and confidence and assurance got steamrolled, but at the same time your spirit was like, yeah, but no.
Hmm.
You
I call
knew
that the
that.
rebellion. Yeah. If I had any
Oh.
rebellion phase in me, it was all in that camp, all in that category. Just like I don't want to. I'm not gonna ascribe to that. I don't want that to be my future. I pined for the good old days. I pined for like medieval times. I saw things about indigenous culture that just I was like, they're doing it right. Why don't we do that more? Why aren't we still doing that? That seems like they got it figured out. They're living in harmony with nature and they're getting their needs met. Like, sure, industrial revolution, blah, 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 but like where's the sense of like we have to continue this progress? That's what I couldn't understand. And I asked people, and it was very, like you were saying, Sabrina, very confronting. I asked people with that energy of like, why are you doing this kind of thing? And maybe I was like 7 or 8 at the time. And I was met with so much discord and like, yeah, even anger sometimes and scorn of like people that just couldn't answer the question or they seemed to just like outright refuse to answer the question. And I think at that time, I didn't understand that their refusal to my like rebellious questioning was on part due to my way of approaching the questions, sure. And I was also 8, so like I don't know, I only got one method to choose from here. A
I was
lot of
like, don't invalidate your 8-year-old self. You were asking the only way you knew how,
yeah,
like an
but
8-year-old does.
like a lot of the way that the answers I was met with, like by teachers and stuff, was in coming from them maybe already recognizing that it was too late for them. They were already caught up in the rat race. That's a common term that I heard back then, right? And they were already maybe like not even able to grieve the parts of themselves that wish they could have lived that way and feel as though they can't. There's this huge sense, like vast pit of powerlessness that I sensed in everybody around me. And that's what I was afraid of as well. That like, oh, if I, get ready for the real world, something I heard a lot too that I got very upset about, hence the air quotes. I was like, that's not the real, like, what does that even mean? It's just like such a bypass of the questions I was trying to bring up with these people. Yeah, but
Really interesting. It makes me think of a quote I read recently, and it said, there's people who are born awake, there's people who will wake up during the lifetime, and then there's people who will stay asleep.
mm,
It feels like your being came into the world really awake and aware that the old way, to your language, the old way of being feels really right, to live with the land in harmony with nature. And this new way is very confusing and maybe not the healthiest option at times.
mm,
And these people you encountered in your life, you did confront them to wake up, a lot of them. And the ones you can probably discern even now, if you think back to the ones who they didn't have capacity to even explore it. They just immediately shut down, versus the ones who were like, that's an interesting thought. And I'm not sure I want to feel the emotions that are associated with me having to explore that. So we're just going
mm,
to shut that down.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, just that feels really good for you to both of you have done really well already, like kind of reflecting these things about me, which I didn't expect this conversation to take that turn, which is really great. So thank you for that. It kind of feels like therapy in a way right now, which is nice. Bonus.
I'm
Uh,
sorry, it happens.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, freaking awesome. I'm here for it. It feels very authentic. So thank you. And it's informative too. I mean, reflections like this are so valuable for me, So I already feel, yeah, really seen and really understood and also connected to those people as well, connected to their hurt and connected to the misunderstanding. And even, I want to really acknowledge here as well, maybe a sense of humility. I don't want to invalidate my younger self. Thank you, Sabrina, for mentioning that. I have a history of doing that to a really like sad degree, not healthy, and I'm working on it. So this is part of it. But I want to have a tone of humility here because as a young person, sure, maybe I came in really awake, but why was I able to come into the world that way with a lot of privilege, with a lot of things that are from the progressive system that I grew to hate and saw as the problem that was causing all of the people around me so much heartbreak and so much busyness that they didn't have time to see me and meet my needs. It came from that again. It came from this selfish place and was just like authentically, how do I get this to work? How do I get my needs met? And I hit these walls and these walls of yeah, people not having the time. It all came back to time to do it all. And I recognized that it was a very unique position to be born into a generation and in a neighborhood and in a family that had it so good that I was able to explore these things in my developing consciousness. And there's a lot about the good old days that I was pining for that I didn't understand. I could never see the problems that they might have had. I could only fantasize that their lifestyle was better because of the problems I was looking at in the current reality that I was born into and seeing and just like hoping for a solution to that. So I was looking at the positive, but I think that actually had me neglect a lot of the negative and even not recognize maybe that there's an equal, there's always a trade-off there. So I started to learn a lot about that too as I got older, that maybe it's not worse now. Maybe it wasn't better then. This is what we got. And that was hard for me to accept and still is. I'm like, okay, darn, like, then what do we do? It just became like, what do we do? What can I do now? And the dream never died. So
Go back to the forest.
Exactly. Maybe it can be that easy. Maybe I can just take more walks. Maybe I can get a dog and walk a dog. Does wonders for people's mental health. Studies abound on that kind of thing. Maybe I can ask for hugs more. I don't know. Simple things. Like, what are the things that will get me closer to that in my daily life and in my routine? Those were the things that I started studying with like intense vigor to save myself. And that became things like playing the didgeridoo, things like learning breathwork, things like studying yoga, things like traveling around the world and meeting people and just keeping my eyes open and keeping that inner child alive. That was really what informed all of my work in the last 10 years of my life that has formed me into a person that still has so much care for others, but also for all of life that I'm still working on bridging all of those things for people and for the world. So I see myself, I guess, as an ambassador of all of creation and wanting them to just really get along more and more. So I'm always asking that question, how can we do that better? How can we do that better? If there's pain in the way, how do we be with that? How do we not run away from it? How do we slow down enough to meet each other in ways where we can see each other like truly the way that we want to be seen? Questions like that. That is why I do what I do, is like just trying to answer those questions. And I'm not going to even say that I'm committed to like this need to find the answer. I think it's more continually asking the question is just going to lead me to make the steps, like the name of your podcast, towards a life that feels at least in alignment with what I value. And I think if I don't do that, if I notice like I will slip because there's so many ways to be distracted from that aim. So that's where it leaves me here, like doing the stuff.
Such an exquisite definition ultimately for alignment and alignment in one's life. If you can be in a state of really genuinely living life as an ambassador for all of creation. I feel like all of a sudden, perhaps I have a definition for what would be the epitome of an aligned life, what that would look like, what that would feel like in my body, with the freedom to show up and express in all of those ways. A theme that's come up both in our conversation here just today, but in so many fascinating areas of my life right now, is the importance of not just nurturing in our inner child, but of really cultivating a close relationship so that we can receive their wisdom and be with them to continue sparking these moments of wonder, to continue to really fuel a sense of curiosity. I love some of the different things you describe, finding wonder. And yes, the outside natural world abounds with so much nature TV, my brain calls it, but also talking about the desk, right? Like we can tune into that. And when you said that, I was like, yeah, metal. Oh, but my glass tabletop was probably once sand in a sea. Like, to tune in and tap into those moments. I think we struggle with that even more in these more modern times, and linking this back to that sense of longing for simpler times. I find, as a very aware adult, year by year, the world gets noticeably more complex, more busy, just with the influx of information that's available, and, content that's being created, and voices that are being amplified. And all of this is absolutely incredible. And if we don't have the internal systems to work in a symbiotic way with all of that, it just gets really easy to feel like we're gripping on our paddleboard at sea that's just like constantly waves after waves, where we're not sure what's coming next, but we're pretty sure we're headed in the right direction. One of our questions is, what does alignment mean to you? And I'm feeling like you've answered that really beautifully in the first part of our conversation. So I'm going to flip things a little bit and ask you instead, both in relation to your journey, but also in relationship with the people that you work with and support. What does misalignment look like? And oh, shoot, that's so funny. He's already talked about that too, but I'd like to really, really highlight it, maybe more so in relation to how you work with others who are recognizing misalignment in their own lives, and a little bit about what that can look like from the perspective of finding their way to a greater alignment with some of the practices that are really part of you and your world.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Maybe sure, I spoke to lack of alignment. But this question takes me like down a different path with depth, which is something I really appreciate in conversations as well. It's the way I think, so that's a great one. Yeah, visually, what came to mind as you were asking that is, first of all, it's so easy to recognize. Actually, when Sabrina and I were checking in, doing the like, hey, how are you, things, I almost can't answer that question anymore. I really like catch myself. I'm like, I don't know. It's just everything. I mean, unless I saw you 5 minutes ago, I probably feel entirely different than I did then. So it's everything, and it's really human. And for me, it's really natural to be on these waves and things like this. And part of it is recognizing, for me, what's becoming really, really important is recognizing the power of my choice to choose what I focus on. Because all of it can feel really complex. I agree with you, Sheena, at any time. And I can't even say life didn't feel complex for people back in the good old days. I can't even ask them. So it becomes even more of like, okay, it just puts me back in the present moment. What can I do now? And to see misalignment in people is so easy. People complain. That's a first one. Complaints are very natural. And it can become a habit that takes us away from the power of our choice to focus on the good things, the things that we're grateful for, the sand in our desk, maybe the connection to this sense of peace that just thinking about that can allow me. And people talk about space a lot nowadays, at least in my circles. Like I would say sum it up and generalize really easy, but like hippies, which I love, and I am one by and large, they talk about space a lot, like space holding. And part of the rebellion in me is like, I don't really know what that means. I don't think I'm gonna say that. I'm not gonna identify with that. I'm gonna say I'm a space holder. It's still a question mark for me. But that's how language evolves and we talk about it. And nowadays, with a world that's so complex externally, it's almost becoming more and more vital to answer questions like that for ourselves internally. So, like, what does space mean now? A lot of it is tuning inward and having a relationship with ourselves. And relationships are everything. So, I'm taking a very non-linear approach to answering this question. So, bear with me. That's how my mind works. And yeah, so lack of alignment is super easy to recognize. I see it all the time. I always have. People know what it looks like. People are sad. Maybe people are showing body language of not being connected, not looking each other in the eye, not smiling naturally, things like this, hunching their shoulders in, having this kind of contracted body language. Things like that can definitely speak to a lack of alignment, I would think, from what I've observed and felt in my body. And for me in my like work now, coming back to what I do and maybe the spaces that I offer people and invite them into, this spaciousness, is to really just have a deeper relationship and increase their self-awareness, as uncomfortable as that can be. That's really, I think, primary. And I didn't recognize that so clearly until somebody else gave me that feedback that has been attending a lot of my men's group events. So thank you to him for offering me that very generous feedback of like, he was kind of sharing a moment where I was expressing some self-doubt again about what I'm doing. And he was kind of like wanting to reassure me, I think, and like establishing and telling me what the value that I brought him was. And that was the main thing he spoke about, was just that I was offering these men, in this case, the space to learn about themselves and have a greater relationship with themselves. So that really stood out. And there are so many avenues, there's so many tools and tricks and ways we can do that. And I try not to hold on to any one as being like, this is the one, this is the one. I like to have a space to be curious and to try things out, maybe like a kid would, is like, hey, let's try jumping up and down for 15 minutes straight. Have you ever done that? I don't know, me neither. Let's see what happens. I might feel more connected to myself. I might feel more present. I might feel more in alignment. I might not even know what that means yet, but I might feel that way if I try this weird thing. So I do a lot of that, and a lot of it is body-based. So being with the energy of my body, focusing on the energy and the sensations in my body is like the quickest route in to having a deeper relationship with myself. And that's what I like to teach people. And by teach, I usually mean ask them to try weird stuff and see what happens. Because I can't even pretend it's like going to work for them. So that's where that comes from.
I love that so, 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 so much. As someone who learned mindfulness, meditation, and practices Vipassana, it can be really uncomfortable when one is trying to just sit and be still and go inwards and sense what's here. However, the invitation to do something weird shakes up so many different energy bodies all at the same time, and then gives us so much richness to work with. Like, whoa, my feet feel this way, head is feeling this way. My thoughts are, like there's just so much more from the energy that you created than being still and observing what arises, which is a beautiful practice. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love it. But for folks who especially are just learning that they can even tune into themselves in these really body-based ways, to give them something juicy to work with just lights me up.
Mm-hmm.
I also really appreciate that you don't come with a very rigid toolkit. And in my own journey, I've sought out a multitude of various practitioners, and many of them will come in with, this is my practice, this is what I do, and this is why you should do it exactly the way I do it. And for somebody who's struggled with a lack of sense of self, like a real inner knowing for so long, I've approached a lot of those situations like, okay, this is my solution. I can just plug this in and hit play and I'm going to be great. And this theme came up for me recently. I was talking to somebody about it, like this idea that so many of us are looking for a plug and play solution. And when you can get to a space where, to your point, like going in through the energy body is the quickest way, once you start to play around with and get creative and get curious and get really fun with different ways of doing that, you actually get to explore what works for your unique being. And I think that's where so much magic happens, and people forget that, yeah, I can give you 50 different practices to figure this shit out, but like you still have to go figure it out for yourself and figure out what's going to work for you and your unique body. And I think that's beautiful. And I think not enough practitioners have that mindset.
Thank you. Oh yeah, Sabrina, I definitely can relate. Oh my gosh, I did so much of that. I mean, I went to India to study yoga for exactly that reason. And it worked to a degree. It is very helpful, and I'll never invalidate that for anyone. Sometimes that can be a plug and play kind of tactile thing for people to have that focus, that structure, whatever it is about those practices might be the light bulb for them. And there's people that dedicate their whole lives to one practice, but I have never been that way. And I've tried to mold myself into being that way. And that has resulted in a lot of lack of alignment for me, which can be super uncomfortable for other people. And I get that. One thing you reminded me of was two kind of like new mottos that have been illuminating themselves in my mind. I'm very visual. That's why I do these hand gestures and stuff. One is, if I continue like this with whatever it is, maybe my busyness, my sense of overwhelm, my responsibilities, all of it, my negative bad habits that I think I have, whatever it is, my relationships that I currently have that don't feel awesome or ideal. If this stays this way forever, how will I get by? How will I continue? And for me, that's been really important, because it's instead of coming from it like, oh, this is bad, I need to run away from it, I need to change, I need to do something else, I need to fix, I need to heal. It's more like leaning into the suffering, honestly, of like, okay, what if this is this way forever? I mean, what if I lost my arm? How would I get by if I never get my arm back? Am I going to lay down and die, or am I going to continue? But how am I going to continue? And that can lead me so much faster through the immense discomfort that even that question can bring, into finding the intuitive approach to what I need to make it happen, and to come to maybe a place of feeling more contentment, more peace, more alignment, all these positive buzzwords that we can throw in there, right? It can become like a compass for me. So that was one you reminded me of. Yeah, which is really important. I lost track of the other one because I'm super excited about that, but it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it was cool. Good stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You were talking about practitioners and holding to like one practice. I recognize as well that a lot of people don't like that, and they might not like that about me either. That I'm not going to show up and say like, hey, here's the answer. Here's the plug and play thing. And I think it can be so difficult, and I catch it in myself, falling into patterns of like, this is the real world, bud, kind of stuff that really has broken my heart. Like, I'm just trying to make it work too with all this modern stuff we got going on and all the complex things we got to meet. And I'm like, okay, I'm super busy, and maybe I want something efficient to solve my problem. That's so natural. That is so valid. And the the answer, or like the plug and play thing, is coming from a place, from the mindset that has already gotten me to the place of thinking that I'm unwell enough to look for an answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So wanting that answer, one, very valid, but it's also informed from the type of person that I have become through my choices and through external pressure to become the person that is suffering enough that I'm looking for help. So that version of help, I don't think will ever be the solution that this current version of me is hoping for. And that's what I try to break. I just try to break people up when we do things together. And that's, again, to the weird things and the body-based things. That for me is what I need. I need to like flail and like punch a pillow and do really wacky stuff sometimes that other people would definitely deem me insane, especially if I was in the good old days. People would probably just burn me and call me a warlock or something crazy already, because those are the things that have broken up that like, oh, it has to be this way. Where is the actual answer? And a lot of people can't tune in enough through the discomfort to find an intuitive answer. You know, a lot of practitioners say, you know what you need, but a lot of people feel really confronted by that statement alone. It comes from a place of being empowering, and I get that, but a lot of people are like, I don't know what I need. I don't. I want you to tell me, or like I want someone to tell me, or some light to shine in here and help me through this, because they're blinded from that perspective so far of being that super, you know, uptight or disconnected version of themselves. So yeah, it comes back to like, let's just break it all up. Let's not expect anything. Let's not use a plug and play yet. And maybe one of the weird things that I either invite you to try or you come up with on your own will be the best thing for you, and you can try it out for a while. And maybe you do it for 50 years, awesome. Maybe you do it for 20 minutes and then you're like, wow, that sucked. What else you got? Okay. Okay. I think the intention is very vital there.
I can't help but wonder how many of us we do actually know, but we're not willing to hear what we're telling ourselves. We don't trust our own knowing about how to tend to ourselves. The biggest gift, I think, for me over the last few years has been cultivating that toolbox. So sometimes I too go heads down and learn as much as I can and really focus on one practice. But I do so that my body can learn truly what that practice feels like and how it can be helpful and serve. And then I say thank you, and that one goes in the toolbox, and then I get to be curious and explore what's next. And that really has been the theme of the One Step Ahead series is get curious, listen, and trust yourself when you feel a calling towards something that has the potential of making things feel better. Maybe things feel clearer, a little bit less confusing, frustrating, overwhelming, all of the contrasting elements of our lives that can feel that they are more present than the sweet, joyful ones. I really love the way that you just described all of that for us. So thank you.
Yeah, this really just is singing for me right now, because I think because I've been feeling it a lot lately, and it's been taking me away from my alignment, and I've really been going inward and questioning like, what am I committed to? What works for me? Feeling a little like gooey, uncertain. And around me, so many people nowadays talking about overwhelm and anxiety and things like this, and feeling like there's too much, it's too fast, it's too complex, there's too much going on, can't keep up with it all. These kinds of things are taking people away from their alignment and any capacity they have to be with themselves, let alone be with the amazingness of all the little intricacies of like the cells that are living and breathing all around them, living their lives, right? So any plug and play situation or tool that anyone can offer, no matter how efficient it is, because I know this efficiency thing is like such a big hype, like market driver. Like, oh, I'll tell you how to stop your anxiousness in like 2 minutes. There's 2 minute practice, so easy. Like, yeah, you only need 2 minutes, it's gonna be great. Sign up for my coaching courses. It's like only $5,000, whatever, that kind of thing. No matter how efficient it is, if I'm feeling full in my life, and that's the problem, 2 extra minutes added in is never going to take away from my sense of overwhelm. That right there is not the solution. It requires maybe me looking at my life and auditing my commitments and asking myself, what is it in my current very full life that I have to get rid of? What do I have to say no to? What in my life is not actually essential before I even hope to add any new practice in? Because any new practice now is just going to feel like more homework and more of a responsibility, and I'm going to resist it. It might be the healthiest practice on the planet that universally works for every single person if they had the time and the availability to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like fundamentally, we almost have to like reverse our approach to looking for practices to do that will make us better.
Absolutely. It really connects to your statement earlier of, I have the power of choice to choose what I focus on. And I think it also connects to, that limiting belief that was imposed on you as a child that said, like, this is the real world. The real world is what you choose to make it. That whoever gave you that statement consistently, well, that was their perception. Their perception was, I have to work this 9 to 5 job and earn this pension and drive this car and have this house, or, whatever world they were living in. And they were projecting that onto you so that you tried to live in the box of what they perceived the world to be. And all of these people, myself included, as I reached states of overwhelm, not as often as I used to, but, let's call it often enough, have the choice to reflect and say, okay, what can I change? What can I shift? What can I focus on differently right now? Yeah. It's powerful, very powerful.
And then to trust what it is you hear when you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel so stoked inside. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. Oh, to reprogram all that craziness.
Yeah. It's curious that it sounds so simple, and yet it still, and I've been practicing and learning and trying. Yeah, I can say, I don't like saying the word trying, but I've been really trying to what? I completely lost that thought. That's really funny. I was judging myself for the language that I was choosing. I got so lost on that little tangent that I lost what was happening over here. Funny. I love observing these things.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more kind of direction that I'd like to take our conversation, if the two of you are all right to hang around and chat for a little bit longer.
Yeah. It's been a good whirlwind already, so.
Before I do that, though, friend, do you have something on your whiteboard for us today?
I do.
Oh,
It feels like it's very in alignment as per usual.
So
yeah,
it's gotten really curious to see.
Wesley, I write a little quote on my whiteboard, and we always talk about it for a moment. So today's quote is, "You're not broken. Your body is speaking to you and asking of you a new way of being."
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfectly aligned,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You don't need a plug and play.
Mhm.
No. No.
Yeah.
Okay, just for fun, my first thought about that was I wonder how it would feel if you try to write that quote like upside down with your left hand or with your opposite hand.
Well, you might be shocked to know that I would actually be able to do that probably very legibly.
Excellent.
I am
I don't even care it's legible, but like just for your
left-handed,
creativity.
but also had to learn to do many things with my right. And so I'm very dexterous with both.
Sweet.
I don't know about the upside down part. That I could switch hands, but upside down seems like a whole other. Yeah.
Mhm. Requires a lot of mindfulness, let's just put it that way. And a lot of willingness to suck.
Sure. Yeah, why not?
The other thing that I would like to spend a few minutes talking about,
Mhm.
it's been present with a very good friend in my world these days as well. Um, Pausing to choose my words carefully. As a female who came up not particularly trusting many of the males in my life, I didn't trust most people in my life. Although I
Mm.
desperately wanted to, I would give them my whole heart. But when it came to my healing journey, I'll call it that, as an adult woman, I was very, very naturally drawn to female practitioners, and it was always female practitioners. And I have unfortunate memories of, the one time I saw a dude. Well, maybe if I just said the one time I saw a psychiatrist, that
Mhm.
approach wasn't right for me. But in my 15-year-old brain, those became kind of intertwined.
Mm.
And I don't know, Wesley, if I've explained this to you. I'm sure that I have, but just a reminder for our viewers as well is that the One Step Ahead series is kind of my way of celebrating individuals. And so my heart melted when you received feedback with such sincere appreciation, because I really do want to celebrate you and the work that you do in the world, and thought it might be good to share a little bit of a story, and we can have some conversation if anything comes up. Wesley was the first practitioner that I was open to being held by in breathwork ceremony. And prior to that, it had always, maybe Ocean once or twice, but prior to that, it had always been Kyla and only Kyla.
Mhm.
Check out Kai's episode from the spring season. And because I was part of a multi-day retreat, we had 3 nights together. That really was the sweet, safe container that I needed to step into to kind of nest. And Kyla was there, and I met Ocean, and it felt very like, okay, let's just be curious and see how this goes. And for me, the events of my practice at the retreat were delicious, and they were beautiful. And I wept tears of joy for what felt like hours at a stretch, because everything was like, yes, this is how life is meant to be. We were in circle, we were in nature, we were seeing each other and celebrating each other and loving each other and building new relationships and, eating incredibly nourishing food. Like, all of the things that for me feel like an aligned life were present there. And I walked away a little bit thinking like, oh, well, that was way easier than I expected. And I was really grateful for the energy that was with me and that I was able to share with the circle, and got home, dropped some stuff off, reunited with my love, and then James came with me, his first and only breathwork session so far. And we attended an event where we started with ecstatic dance, and then we moved into some breathwork. And it was during that breathwork session that I feel I did some of my most monumental reprogramming, healing, but reprogramming, relationship building. I'm not one to visualize. I'm not one to go, way deep during guided meditations. But during that breathwork session, I felt, and I trusted that they were there. I felt, I'm going to call them all of my grandfather ancestors. So there was just multitudes of male energy, and I felt them in a circle around me in that space. And as they arrived, as I started accepting, okay, I think this is what's happening here. Now, please remember, I was doing breath work only. I wasn't in any kind of a chemically altered state. But that's when Wesley was there. And he just gently, I don't even know if you so lightly pressed your hand just on my chest. And there was this grounding. And I remember being like, of course, all of this masculine love is here to hold me and celebrate me. And I felt that it was an opportunity for me to receive gratitude from my male lineage, recognition for some of the really hard things that, as a result of their choices, I may have been carrying. And it was an opportunity for me at the same time to offer gratitude back to them and to really feel that we were connecting with and sharing with from a place of love and acknowledgement. I had no idea that any of that was anything that my being thought I needed to spend time doing. And in fact, it caught me very much off guard. I had great, big body racking sobs. I held Wesley's hand so tight, and I sat with all of these grandfather ancestors until it felt complete. And I just remember this incredible wave of gratitude for Wesley, for being the physical masculine presence that offered to hold me, to have that experience. And I try not to overthink most of these things, but even just in describing it, my whole body is like, yeah, of course, this is the synchronistic flow of events and people that we meet to really just help us nurture those parts of ourselves that are curious and do believe in better ways. And interesting, the throat chakra getting a little tight in there. So
Yeah.
all of this to say, for our sisters out there who have really been celebrating all of the incredible female practitioners that we've been able to shine a bit of a spotlight on, I want to thank you as well for hearing the story of how powerful and necessary it is for us to have both, for it to really feel, I think, like I can't imagine feeling as aligned as I do now if I hadn't made peace with some of the masculine trauma in my life. And because of incredible men doing work like yourself, Wesley, who are nurturing an authentic, aligned life for themselves and sharing what they're learning and what their gifts are. And oh, friend, you really do have such magical energy. We just, can I just be near you? I want to say thank you, and I want to encourage others to just be open to it and to trust again that the right people come into our lives at the right time, and that amazing things happen when we follow our heart and we just allow our bodies to show us our spirits, our hearts, what it is that we need to be doing.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. So awesome. That's really amazing. I had a sense of wanting to steer the conversation towards this because you alluded to the fact that I was like the first man or male person to speak on this podcast. And I mean, you had told me that previously too. So I was already feeling a little bit of like a interesting charge about that very topic that I wanted to maybe like steer towards and talk about here because I think it's really helpful. And initially, part of me felt one incredibly honored, and that exists and is super real. And like I mean, I could never make up what you just said. And like, I didn't know all of the details of that story either. You had shared some of that, like so genuinely with me already, which touches my heart very, very deeply. And I thank you for it. And the humble part of me wants to say, like, oh, that's more you, that's more about what you did to get to that place than it is about me. And like, well, yeah, it's of course it's also about like how I show up. There's lots of factors in that. And I don't think I need to point them all out. The main thing I wanted to speak to here is like the a littler part of me that has been hurt by like this confusing dynamic of like gender role differentiation in the past and seeing a lot of harm in the women that I love in my past as well, feeling very confused about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a good man, traits to acquire, traits to not acquire, what to focus on, all of that stuff. It got really messy, and part of me still feels a little bit like annoyed. And I was kind of like, oh geez, like it feels really honored, like it's such a great honor, and at the same time, I'm a bit annoyed that I'm the only man on the show. Like I don't want to be, because I know there's other really great men out there doing work like I do, similar things that I do that might be in alignment for the podcast you're sharing. But I don't need to like necessarily defend my whole gender either. So I think what's more important is to say, for me, it's like it's all relevant and it's all important. And you said it really well at the end there, Sheena. Like I think both is good. And I find a lot of agreement with that in my life. I see myself like very open, and it's more like a conscious thing than a physical thing. There's a lot of physical things about being in a man's body that also dictate how I am perceived on a subconscious level. Even if somebody doesn't see me, hear me, or feel me, parts of their brain might activate in a different way if I even walk up behind them than if a woman walks up behind them. That is real, fundamentally real things that have been measured scientifically and all of this. I can't deny that. And at the same time, it's like, well, what else can we do? I don't think it needs to be this endless conversation of like, what do women need to do? What do men need to do? It's not this like who's better at what kind of question for me. It's more like, can we just do the things that feel right for us individually, and again, maybe like come tune into ourselves again, like what feels in alignment. And that's when things like you're saying, Sheena, magic happen. Like I couldn't intend for that experience you had to happen. I couldn't possibly know that that was going to happen. That wasn't my goal. That's just, it's too far out there. So I think being open and just showing up authentically is the best way to go. And then making room for magical things like that to happen when we're just treating each other with respect and authenticity and being really real with each other, about all the vulnerable parts. I mean, I feel sometimes like guilty and sad and angry at other men when I hear the harm that they've caused in the past. It's super real. It's very valid. And I also recognize there's a lot of nuance to the way that men have been kind of taught to behave. There's this, post-World War soldier kind of mentality that's still unraveling in our generation that requires just a lot of consciousness and a lot of spaciousness and a lot of heart and care and tenderness, I think, to move through. And it's not just like, oh, men need to get better, or oh, women needs to get better, or women are better at taking care of other people. Again, there's some fundamental, like instinctual genetic things that I think, amount to more women being practitioners or nurses or caretakers. That's very real. So maybe that's why I'm one of many on this show, and things like that as well. And it's like we can all just do good things for each other. Yeah. If the question is there, I'll talk about it. And I think it can amount to a lot of healing. But for me, it's more going to be like individual in the experiences I have with certain people. And in this whole conversation as well, like a large part of my work is actually just hosting things for only men. And that has been really, really important for me to reconcile all of my own confusion and hurt about what it means to be a man in this world at this time. So that has become a big passion for me in holding space like that and teaching other men how to be in better relationship with themselves, how to communicate better with themselves and with each other. And the main thing that happens in men's work, regardless of sexual orientation, is they come wanting to get more skills, more knowledge, and work on themselves and do the hard, uncomfortable shit that it takes to show up better for the other people in their life that they deeply care about. That's what I know. And I think it's just the same across the board. People want to do well, and they want their relationships to be good and healthy. And we're all just doing parts of it all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to love. We're all doing the work and getting to know ourselves so that we can love and be loved better, I think, during this short lifetime that we've got. And thank you for bringing just, I think, a little bit of the perspective that was needed, because you are the only one, because so far you are the only one. But my wish for the program is that we are creating ripples and really helping it, just share some good stories about what happens when we learn and do all of these practices in community together with each other. The goal is to live a good life. We're kindred spirits. We're doing the work. We already know we're kindred spirits. So let's see what we can get done for ourselves, for each other, for all beings, for the planet, right? Keep following that. I believe, I love that we're in the early stages of the age of Aquarius. And I'm genuinely optimistic that the ripples are traveling far and wide at a velocity greater than we can even anticipate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. The final thing I'm noting here, also noticing our time, and maybe we're coming up to a closing, which is great. Feels natural as well. And there's a book I just read recently by like a journalist, I think, that had kind of transcribed a bunch of interviews he had with this other amazing person, and it's called How to Be a Human. An autistic man's like approach to living life as a human. That's not the entire title, so sorry, I kind of botched it, but How to Be Human. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, come on. That's kind of funny and on the nose, and like also I want to know. And he was talking a lot about consciously choosing his personality, which was super interesting to read about. I'm not going to try and deliver it all here. If you want to read about it more, recommend read that book. It's just really cool and very insightful. He had such a great way of describing that he, in social situations, actually feels as though he needs to actively turn on personality traits, and that it's not inauthentic. He has a really good way of like being both like a yes and kind of person. He says why he does it, and he says why it's useful, and he says things like it's not inauthentic because he is choosing to do it, and for good reasons, like, and for very positive reasons, for meeting his needs of connecting with other people, things like this, for his needs of being understood, understanding other people, that kind of stuff. And his default traits that he's chosen is radical optimism. That's how he's like gave his personality that he chose and consciously like turns on every day with other people, radical optimism. And that was kind of how we started, like choosing what we focus on, choosing what we need to do together to make it all work. Because I mean, let's be honest, stuff's falling apart all the time. It's a temporary life. Earth loves decomposing everything back into other stuff. It's temporary. Like it's gonna all come undone at some point, and that makes it all the more precious. So we can focus on all the things that are falling apart, not going great, and all the problems and all the things that don't feel awesome and in alignment. And to a certain degree, that can be useful and informative, as much as it can take us back to the compass of that aligned life, or that radical optimism that we might need to consciously activate on purpose more in our personalities, even if it feels maybe like that's not super authentic all the time. It's like training. I think it just takes a bit of training.
I feel like we could talk for another hour about this.
Absolutely. I love
Later.
that we're
Next
winding
time.
down our conversation with radical optimism and the
Yeah.
power of choice.
Beautiful.
Boom.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you, Jory Fleming, for that one. Yeah.
I have to check it out. I am curious. Thank you both so much. This was such a rich conversation. Thank you both for being so generous with your time. Thank you to our viewers and listeners. Another fascinating conversation. Yeah. Big gratitude and best wishes.
Thank you.